Chapter 3. You probably thought vampires weren't real, right? Well, they are. Mum worked for a company that paid her to catch them. Dad, on the other hand, worked in a supermarket and had to wear a neon t-shirt with a name badge pinned on it. You see, my mum's family has hunted vampires for generations. I was the next in a long line of hunters. Our job was to keep people safe. Vampires were dangerous and emotionless. They were strong and fast, and they drank human blood. It was up to hunters to track them down, capture them, and send them to Traxis, a secret island north of Scotland. If a vampire was sent to Traxis, they never came back. Thankfully, hunters had special abilities too. We were strong and fast like vampires. Well, most hunters were. I, on the other hand, was not super fast, super strong, or super anything for that matter. Your powers will come, Mum used to tell me. Now, however, she avoided the subject. I shuddered at the thought of our trip into the mountains. Mum had taken me camping over the summer to try to speed up my slow progress. She said that was how she'd discovered her hunter powers when she was my age. We went on long hikes that blistered my feet, battled with wooden swords that left my wrists aching, and camped in the wild in a tent that was only just large enough for the two of us. One night, she took me to a mountain cave to look for bats. It was pitch black, and she said we couldn't use torches. I shivered at the thought of bats watching us from the shadows. I kept my eyes alert. Old vampires had the power to turn into bats. "Do you sense any vampires?" I asked. "No," she said. "It's too cold and uncomfortable." "Then why are we here?" "Training," she answered, as if it had been obvious. After what felt like hours of searching, we found their roost. The bats hardly moved. We sat there watching them for the rest of the night. Most of them hung upside down from the roof of the cave, as still as stone. Mum told me I needed to be able to spot a bat from far away, hear them, and know how to hide from them. If a vampire transformed into a bat, they could easily escape capture. I had to be able to track them in human form and in bat form. We went back to the cave night after night. "How does a vampire learn to become a bat?" I asked one evening as we leaned against the cave wall watching the roost. My back was sore and my toes were numb. I hoped that talking would distract me. "Henrietta, vampires are pure evil, and they drink human blood. That's all you need to know." "There's got to be more to them," I said. "Humans get bitten," Mum said irritably, "and then they turn into vampires. They get stronger every year, and after a few 100 years, they gain other powers as well. That's it." I already know all that, I thought. But before I could ask anything else, she pulled a strange-looking weapon from her belt. It was a short metal knife, the length of a teaspoon, with a wooden point at one end. I recognized the wood from my training. It was red oak. Since wood was the only thing that could hurt vampires, I'd learned all the different types years ago. Mum twirled the strange little weapon in her fingers. "Do you know what this is?" she asked. I shrugged. "It's a throwing stake," she told me. "A vampire once tried to escape from me. He thought it would be safe flying off in bat form. The fool. I hit him in the wing with one of these." She held up the throwing stake, stroking its polished red oak point. "The metal makes it heavy, so it flies better. The oak makes it lethal. The vampire was easy to trap once I took him down." Without a flicker of hesitation, she took aim and threw the weapon straight into the heart of the bat's roost. One of the bats dropped to the floor like dead fruit from a tree. The cave exploded with dark, flapping shapes. My heart skipped a beat as they screeched and squealed. "That's how you kill a vampire," Mum whispered triumphantly. It wasn't a vampire, though, I'd thought, staring at the dead animal, and then at Mum's weapon sticking out of its little chest. It was just a bat. After 3 weeks in the mountains, I had not changed. I was no stronger or faster than before. Ever since we'd returned, Mum had been giving me these sad, disappointed looks whenever we trained. I had never beaten her in battle. Not once. I felt useless, ashamed. What if my superpowers never came? As I got ready for school, I thought about the way she'd tricked me so she could win our training battle. She'd said I was wrong to check if she was okay. If a vampire had tricked me like that, I could have been killed. Vampires heal within minutes. That's what Mum had always told me. Only a wooden stake will really hurt them. So, was she right? Was I being too soft? I frowned. Hurting someone who was already injured just felt wrong, even if they were a vampire. I put on my grey trousers and white blouse and picked up my blue jumper, which had the school logo on it. Sunlight shone through my window. It was going to be a hot day. April would probably wear her blue and white summer dress to school. A smile spread across my face at the thought of seeing my friend. Her full name was April Showers. April Showers! She was probably the only person I knew who hated her name more than I hated mine. My stomach clenched uncomfortably when I remembered the last time we'd spoken on the phone. She'd tried to meet up with me over the summer, but I'd been away camping in the mountains. When we got back, Mum had told me I wasn't allowed to go anywhere or see anyone. "Training comes first, Henrietta," she'd said. So, in 6 whole weeks, I hadn't seen April at all. As I finished getting ready for school, I couldn't help doing a few press-ups and then some high-speed running on the spot. Afterwards, I stood in front of the mirror. April would definitely wear a summer dress, but I was much happier in my school trousers and white shirt. I wasn't a dress kind of girl. I flexed my arms. Although I had muscles, they weren't very impressive. I sighed and pulled my brown hair back into a ponytail, like always. A long time ago, Dad had put ribbons in my hair, and people had called me pretty. But when Mum had caught me staring at them in the mirror, she'd tugged at one of the ribbons and then sent me a look. I'd known what it had meant. Hunters don't wear pretty ribbons in their hair. A few days later, I'd burned them and sprinkled the ashes in the bin. "Etty!" Dad called from downstairs, distracting me from my memories. "Time to go, sweetie." Those words sent butterflies flapping in my stomach. Soon, I'd be back at school. I'd be in Year 6 with a new teacher, Miss Gravel. The only good part of it was that I'd get to see April again. I only hoped she wouldn't be too upset with me for being such a lousy friend. After grabbing my bag, I headed downstairs to find Dad waiting. He handed me my lunchbox and we left the house. Taking a deep breath, I stepped outside. Dad's truck was an old thing that had peeling red paint and whined going uphill. We were quiet as he drove along the country lanes. We had to pass 3 farms and then cross Barley Bridge before we got to the town. Because Dad used to be a fisherman, our house was way out of town, close to the harbour. People waved at Dad as we drove past them. Brightwood was a small town, and Dad was one of those people who got on with everyone he met. It was a real problem if you were trying to get somewhere in a hurry. Farmers, nosy residents, shop owners, or just random people in the street would regularly stop to chat to him. Now, as we drove through the centre of town, I watched the people in the market setting up their stalls. Half of them shouted, "Good morning," to Dad as we passed. At the weekend, the town square would be full of tourists buying fridge magnets, ice creams, and buckets and spades for the beach. Not to mention the fake witchy things like crystal balls and plastic cauldrons that were always on sale. The shop and stall owners supported the myth that witches used to live in Brightwood hundreds of years ago. The stone circle on Mulberry Hill was said to have been used by witches in the olden days. Of course, no one believed witches ever existed, but it meant tourists would buy fake witches' fingers and tacky broomsticks. I glanced down Sage Lane as we passed it. In the distance I could see Baywater Beach, the main beach in Brightwood. More tourist shops lined the street. I smiled as I thought of April complaining about the lack of real shops in Brightwood. "It's impossible to buy clothes," she'd say. Thankfully, I hated shopping, so it didn't bother me. As school came into sight, I shrank in my seat. The million-year-old building looked like a haunted house, and it contained the evilest thing in the world: schoolwork. Here we go again, I thought. Chapter 4. "Are you okay?" Dad asked, pulling up outside school. The truck windows were down, but it was still boiling. The sunlight shone fiercely through the window screen. "I'm fine," I replied, "just a bit nervous." "You haven't seen your friends in a while," he said, looking at me with worry. "I only have one friend, Dad," I reminded him. "I just hope she's not too mad at me." "Then invite April over," he said. "Tell her she can come around after school." I stared at him for a long moment, shocked. "Dad, are you feeling okay? You know Mum will go insane if I bring April home." "I know, but—" "What if I miss training?" I interrupted. "Invite her over," Dad said, his voice uncharacteristically firm. "I'll cook my famous lasagna. And don't worry about your mother. I'll speak to her." I wasn't sure how to react. What would Mum say? Surely it won't hurt to miss one day of training, I thought. I saw April in the cloakroom, hanging up her bag. Her nails were painted yellow. I never painted my nails. If I did, I would paint them black. She'd also had her hair cut. It had hung down to her waist before, but now it was just below her shoulders. Its colour hadn't changed, though. Bright blonde. Her stud earrings were silver stars. "Hey," I said awkwardly, coming to stand next to her. April tucked her hair behind her ears and smiled. "Etty," she said shyly in her quiet voice. "I knew it," I said. "What?" she asked. "You always wear a summer dress when it's hot." She laughed. "And you wear trousers, even when it's 100 degrees. "True," I agreed, grinning. We headed into class and sat down next to each other at the back. When April opened her pencil case to take out her pen, I noticed she wore a ring. It had a gold band with a yellow, triangle-shaped gem set into the metal. The colour of the gem matched the wheat yellow of her hair. "Where'd you get that?" I asked. She quickly covered the ring with her other hand. Her cheeks went pink. "It's nothing," she said. "It looks expensive." "It isn't." She pulled her hands under the desk so the ring was hidden from sight. That was weird. Before I could say any more about it, she asked me if I'd had a good summer. I told her I'd spent it helping my mum train for another kickboxing championship. That was my cover story for vampire hunter training. When I asked April about her holiday, she shrugged. "I didn't really do a lot," she said. "I practiced my violin, and I helped Grandma out with some stuff." Her voice trailed off. My heart sank. Her summer had been rubbish. "Is your grandma still as crazy as ever?" I asked, trying to make her smile. "Crazier," April replied, her tone serious. "She started sprinkling herbs across windowsills and doorways to ward off dark energy. Ever since her friend, you know." "I know," I said. Her grandma's friend, Helen, an old woman who had lived alone in a house by the beach, had died unexpectedly a few weeks ago. No one knew exactly how Helen had died. "I'm worried about Grandma," April said. "She's always been a bit odd, but she's been saying some really weird things lately." "Like what?" "Just stuff," she said, her eyebrows drawing together. We were silent for a while. I tried to think of something to say. "I lied," she said suddenly. "My summer wasn't okay. It was terrible. I got so bored that I even started helping Grandma weed the garden." "I'm sorry," I told her, feeling guilty. "I should have been around, but I can make it up to you. Dad gave me permission to invite you over after school, if you want." April's mouth fell open. "To your house?" she asked. "I've never seen inside your house before." Dad thought it would be a good idea. "And what about your mum?" she asked warily. I decided to avoid that question. "Can you come?" She grinned and nodded enthusiastically. Then Miss Gravel stepped forward to introduce herself. She was young for a teacher, with red hair and kind eyes that were half hidden behind a pair of stylish glasses. Halfway through taking the register, she called out, "Vladimir Knox!" The class looked at her in confusion. Vladimir Knox? Who was that? No one answered. "Vladimir?" she called again. After a moment, she moved on. At the end of the register, Miss Gravel stood up and told us there would be a new boy joining the class. "Unfortunately," she said, "he doesn't seem to be in school yet. Now, I want you all to be kind and welcoming to him when he arrives. You all know how scary it is starting a new school." For the rest of the day, we were on the lookout for the new boy, but he didn't show up. By the end of the day, the class was buzzing with theories about Vladimir Knox. Some of the girls thought he sounded exotic. One girl declared that she was in love with him already. "I hope he's nice," April said as we got our home things from our pegs. "We could add another friend to our group." "We'd be the weirdest named group in the world," I replied. "Henrietta Steele, April Showers, and Vladimir Knox." April burst into laughter. Once we were outside, we ran over to April's grandma's rickety car, a blue VW Beetle that looked like it was about to fall apart. April's grandma, who everyone called Grandma Elsie, looked young for such an old person. She wore headscarves in varying shades of blue and lots of necklaces with crystals hanging from them. One particular necklace had always fascinated me, with its gold chain and the 3 hourglasses attached to it. Elsie's earrings were always long and dangly, and her hair, which I think should have been grey, was dyed blonde. She already had her window down when we reached the car and was humming along to an old song that I didn't recognise. Before April could open her mouth to speak, Grandma Elsie said, "Of course you can spend the evening at Etty's. I'll pick you up at 8. April and I exchanged a look. Her grandma had the habit of doing that, somehow knowing what you were going to say before you said it. It was one of the many things that made her seem so odd. Inside her car, I noticed there was a line of green herbs spread across the dashboard. Thanks," April replied. She waved goodbye to her grandma and followed me to my dad's truck. Once we'd climbed inside and fastened our seatbelts, Dad revved the engine and we sped off. As we drove home, I couldn't stop smiling.